The first ships didn't arrive with fire. They arrived with silence. No warning, no transmission, no grand declaration of intent. One moment, Earth spun beneath its familiar sky, blue, fragile, alive, and the next, something vast and impossible eclipsed the stars. At first, astronomers thought it was a glitch. Then they realized the stars weren't gone. Something was simply in front of them. The objects, if they could even be called that, hung in orbit like fragments of night itself. Blacker than space, their surfaces swallowed light rather than reflecting it. Telescopes struggled to define their edges, radar couldn't lock onto them properly. It was as if they existed half a second out of sync with reality. Within hours, every major government on Earth was scrambling. Within 12 hours, every military was on alert. Within 24, the world understood a single, undeniable truth. We were not alone. And whatever had arrived was not friendly. The first attempt at communication came from the United Nations. A global broadcast, mathematics, prime numbers, universal constants, transmitted across every frequency humanity could muster. It was humanity's oldest hope, that intelligence would recognize intelligence. There was no response. No shift in position. No signal returned. Just silence. Then the gravity storms began. It started over the Pacific. Satellites picked up distortions first, subtle ripples in gravitational readings that didn't match any known phenomenon. Scientists argued. Theories clashed. Equipment was recalibrated again and again. Then Honolulu folded. Not exploded. Not burned. Folded. Buildings twisted inward, collapsing into themselves like paper crushed in an invisible fist. The ocean around the islands surged violently, not with waves but with sudden, unnatural shifts. Water pulled upward, then slammed back down. Within minutes, the city was gone. No warning. No survivors. Panic spread faster than any storm. Mara Vance watched it happen from a control room buried beneath what used to be a secure communications facility in Nevada. She was a communications officer, trained to interpret signals, not disasters. But as screens flickered with broken feeds and fragmented satellite imagery, it became clear that this wasn't something anyone had trained for. "Tell me that's fake," someone whispered behind her. Mara didn't answer, because she knew it wasn't. The storm spread. Tokyo, Lagos, Sao Paulo, London. Each city struck without pattern, without rhythm. Gravity itself seemed to twist and snap like a thread pulled too tight. Entire districts vanished in seconds, leaving behind warped landscapes and silence. Air traffic collapsed. Power grids failed. The internet fractured into isolated pockets of desperate information. Humanity, so connected just days before, was suddenly alone. The militaries of the world did what they were built to do. They fought. Fighter jets were scrambled. Missiles were launched. Experimental weapons, some never meant to be used, were deployed against the alien constructs in orbit. None of it worked. Missiles veered off course, their guidance systems failing mid-flight. Jets reported visual contact but couldn't maintain lock. Pilots described the ships as slipping away from targeting systems, as if they weren't fully there. One pilot managed to get close enough to see the surface of a construct before his feed cut out. His final words were broadcast across every channel still active. "They're not ships, they're..." Silence. Days passed. Or maybe it was hours. Time had begun to blur. Mara barely slept. None of them did. Her job, monitoring signals, had become an exercise in futility. There were no alien transmissions to decode, no patterns to analyze. Only human voices, distress calls, fragments of final messages. Families trying to reach each other across a dying world. Then, for the first time, the aliens moved. From orbit, the constructs began to descend. Not all at once, just a few at first, drifting downward with impossible smoothness. They didn't burn through the atmosphere like meteors. They simply appeared closer, as if distance meant nothing to them. Where they landed, the storms followed. But something else came too. Ships. Distorted. Barely visible through shimmering fields that bent light around them. They moved with a fluid, unnatural grace. like shadows learning how to walk. No one got a clear image. Every attempt to record them failed. Cameras glitched, feeds corrupted, data scrambled. But one thing was certain. They had arrived. Mara was in the facility when the evacuation order came. "Pack what you can carry," her commanding officer said, voice tight but controlled. "We're relocating." "Where?" someone asked. He hesitated. Then quietly, "Doesn't matter." They didn't make it far. The transport convoy had barely cleared the desert perimeter when the sky changed. It didn't darken. It warped. The air above them rippled like heat rising from asphalt, except it stretched across the entire horizon. The convoy slowed, then stopped entirely as drivers struggled to maintain control. Mara stepped out of the vehicle, heart pounding, and looked up. Something was descending. Not from above. From everywhere. The world bent. There was no other way to describe it. Sound vanished first, engines, voices, even the wind, cut off as if someone had muted reality. Then came the pressure, crushing and immense, forcing Mara to her knees. Light twisted. Color drained. For a single, impossible moment, she saw the alien construct clearly, its surface shifting, alive with patterns that made no sense to the human mind. And then, darkness. When Mara woke, Earth was gone. Not destroyed. Not burning. Just gone. In its place was a sky she didn't recognize. Green. Unfamiliar. Alien. And all around her, thousands of others were waking too. Confused. Terrified. Alive. That was the moment humanity realized the truth. This wasn't an invasion. It was something far worse. We hadn't been conquered. We had been collected. Mara Vance woke to the sound of breathing. Not her own, though that came in sharp, uneven bursts, but hundreds of others around her. Ragged, panicked, confused. The kind of breathing that filled a space when people didn't yet understand they were in danger. She opened her eyes slowly. The sky was wrong. It wasn't just the color, though that alone was enough to unsettle her. A deep, swirling green stretched endlessly above, streaked with thin currents of darker motion, like something alive drifting beneath the surface of glass. Two suns hung there, unmoving. One burned white and sharp, casting hard shadows. The other glowed a dull red, dim but constant, like an ember that refused to die. Mara sat up. The ground beneath her wasn't soil, not exactly. It looked like dust at first glance, pale and fine, but when she pressed her hand into it, it resisted slightly, almost rubbery, as if it had memory. As if it didn't want to be disturbed. Around her, people were rising. Hundreds. No, thousands. Some in military uniforms. Others in civilian clothes. Some injured. Some screaming. Some just staring at the sky, frozen in the quiet horror of realization. "Where are we?" someone shouted. No one answered. The valley stretched wide in every direction, enclosed by jagged formations that looked like mountains but lacked the randomness of nature. Their edges were too sharp, too precise, as if they had been carved rather than formed, or grown. Mara forced herself to stand, ignoring the dizziness. Her training kicked in, not as comfort but as structure. Observe. Assess. "Hey," she called out, voice hoarse. "Anyone with medical training, start checking the injured." A few heads turned. A few people moved. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first drone appeared just minutes later. At first, it looked like a distortion in the air. A ripple, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Then it resolved into shape. A floating construct, roughly spherical, its surface shifting in layered segments that slid over one another without seams. It emitted no sound. No visible propulsion. It simply hovered. Watching. Mara froze. So did everyone else. The drone moved slowly across the valley, drifting above the crowd like a predator that didn't need to rush. A thin beam of pale light swept downward, passing over groups of people one by one. Scanning. Analyzing. No one dared to move. A man broke first. "Hey," he shouted, waving his arms. "Hey, we're not hostile. We just..." The beam stopped. Locked onto him. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then the man lifted off the ground. Not thrown. not pulled. Lifted, smoothly, silently, as if gravity had simply changed its mind about him. He screamed. And then he was gone. Vanished midair, like he had never been there at all. No one spoke after that. The lesson had been delivered. Hours passed. Or maybe longer. Time felt different here, stretched, uncertain. The twin suns didn't move the way they should. Shadows shifted, but not in predictable ways. It was like being inside a system that followed rules humanity didn't understand. People began to organize. Not because they were told to. Because they had to. Small groups formed, families, soldiers, strangers clinging to whoever was closest. Water was the first priority, but there was none in sight. No rivers. No streams. No vegetation that looked remotely familiar. Just the valley. And whatever lay beyond it. Mara found herself with a group of 12. 2 soldiers. A nurse. A mechanic. The rest civilians, terrified, exhausted, but alive. "What's the plan?" one of the soldiers asked her. She hesitated. There was no plan. But they needed one. "We move," she said finally. "Staying here makes us easy targets." "Targets for what?" the mechanic asked. Mara looked up. As if answering the question, more drones appeared. Not just one. Dozens. Hovering at the edges of the valley now, forming a loose perimeter. Watching. Waiting. "For them," she said quietly. They moved at dusk. Or what passed for dusk. The red sun dimmed further, casting long, eerie shadows, while the white one flickered, just slightly, like a failing light. The temperature dropped quickly, the air growing colder and thinner. Mara led the group toward a break in the jagged formations. Every step felt wrong. The ground shifted subtly beneath their feet, not enough to trip them, but enough to remind them this world wasn't passive. It reacted. It noticed. Halfway to the ridge, they heard it. A sound. Vibrating. Not quite a growl, not quite mechanical. Something else. Something alive. It came from the shadows. A creature, if that word even applied, emerged slowly, its form unfolding in ways that made Mara's eyes struggle to keep up. It was tall, taller than any human, its body segmented like an insect but fluid like liquid. Its surface reflected the green sky in fractured patterns, making it hard to focus on. It had no visible face. But it was looking at them. Mara raised her hand instinctively, signaling the group to stop. "Don't run," she whispered. No one argued. The creature tilted, just slightly. Then it moved. It was fast. Too fast. One moment it stood still, the next it was among them. A man screamed as it struck, one precise movement, silent and efficient. He dropped instantly, unmoving. The group scattered. Mara grabbed the nearest person, a young woman frozen in place, and pulled her behind a rock formation. "Stay down," she hissed. The creature didn't chase wildly. It hunted. Calculated. It moved through the group with terrifying precision, striking only when it had to, ignoring those who stayed still long enough. Mara realized something then. It wasn't killing indiscriminately. It was testing. A sharp crack split the air. One of the soldiers had fired. The weapon, a standard-issue rifle, barely made a dent. The projectile struck the creature's surface and bent, flattened like it had hit something impossibly dense. The creature turned. Focused. The soldier didn't get a second shot. Silence returned as quickly as the chaos had come. The creature stood still for a moment. Then, without warning, it retreated, slipping back into the shadows, vanishing as if it had never existed. Leaving behind bodies. And survivors. No one spoke for a long time. Mara finally stood, her hands shaking despite her efforts to control them. "They're not just watching us," she said, voice low. "They're measuring us." As night, or whatever this world called night, settled in, the valley behind them lit up. Not with fire. With light. Alien constructs descended in the distance, beams sweeping across the land, illuminating groups of humans still trapped below. Organizing them. Separating them. Mara watched from the ridge, her stomach tightening. This wasn't random. Nothing here was random. The drones. The creatures. The terrain. It was all part of something. A system. A design. And as the green sky darkened further, one thought settled heavily in her mind. They hadn't just been brought here to survive. They had been brought here to be tested. And humanity was already failing. The first rule of survival was simple. Don't be seen. The second came later. Don't be predictable. Weeks passed. Or months. Time had no meaning under the green sky. Mara stopped trying to count the days after the third cycle of the red sun dimming completely and returning again. Sleep came in fragments. Hunger was constant. Fear became something quieter, less sharp, more familiar, more useful. Humanity adapted. It always did. The valley was long behind them now. What had once been a mass of confused survivors had splintered into smaller groups, each learning the same lesson in different ways. Large numbers got you killed. Noise got you killed. Patterns got you killed. So they changed. Mara's group was down to 8. They moved at irregular intervals, never in straight lines, never at the same time twice. They spoke in whispers, then in gestures, and eventually not at all unless absolutely necessary. Even breathing felt like a risk. The drones still patrolled, silent, tireless. Their scanning beams swept across the terrain in shifting patterns that almost seemed random until you watched long enough. Then you saw it. A rhythm. Not perfect. Not repeating. But intentional. They want us to think we understand it, Elias said once. Mara glanced at him. Elias wasn't a soldier. He had been a systems analyst back on Earth. Someone who studied patterns, networks, behavior. Here, that made him invaluable. You think it's a trap? She asked. I think everything here is a trap, he replied calmly. The question is which ones we can survive. They learned to move between the scans, timing their crossings between the beams, using the jagged terrain to break line of sight. Even the strange, semi-living ground beneath them could be used. Certain areas absorbed heat differently, masking their presence for a few precious seconds. Every step was calculated. Every risk measured. And still, people died. The creatures were worse. The drones watched. The creatures hunted. Mara had named the first one she saw up close. Glasswalker. Not because it was made of glass, but because it moved like something fragile and sharp at the same time. Its surface reflected the world in broken fragments, making it hard to track, harder to understand. They weren't the only ones. There were others now. Smaller ones that moved in packs, skittering across the ground with unnatural speed. Larger ones that barely moved at all, until you got too close. Each one different. Each one deadly. Each one selective. They're not just predators, Elias said one night as they huddled in a narrow crevice, hidden from the open sky. Mar didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ridge above. What are they then? He hesitated. Filters. That made her turn. Filters. They don't wipe out groups completely. They reduce them. Pressure them. Force reactions. He gestured vaguely toward the open terrain. Every encounter teaches us something, or kills the ones who don't learn fast enough. Mara's jaw tightened. You're saying this is intentional. I'm saying nothing here is accidental. The idea settled into her mind like a weight. Because it felt true. Too true. The first time they fought back, it wasn't planned. It was desperation. They had been tracking a drone. Carefully. From a distance. Not hunting it, just observing. Elias believed they could learn more by studying how it moved, how it scanned, how it reacted to different environments. Mar wasn't convinced. But she followed anyway. The opportunity came suddenly. The drone dipped lower than usual, its scanning beam flickering slightly as it passed over a cluster of jagged formations. For a brief moment, its surface shifted, panels sliding open, exposing something inside. Energy. Power. Vulnerability. Now, Elias whispered. Mar didn't hesitate. The weapon they used wasn't really a weapon. Not originally. It was a piece of scavenged metal, dense, irregular, taken from the remains of something that had crashed or been discarded. They had no idea what it was, only that it interfered with the drone scans when held close. Elias had modified it. Barely. Just enough. Mara stepped out from cover. For a single, terrifying second, She stood fully exposed beneath the alien sky. The drone's beam locked onto her instantly. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Do it," Elias hissed. She threw the device. It struck the drone's surface, and everything went wrong. Not for them. For it. The drone spasmed. Its smooth, silent motion broke. The segmented layers of its shell shifted erratically, sliding out of sync. The scanning beam flickered wildly, sweeping across the terrain without control. A sound filled the air. High-pitched, mechanical, almost panicked. The drone dropped. Not fast. Not violently. But enough. "Move!" Mara shouted. They ran. Not away from it. Toward it. The impact was softer than expected. The drone hit the ground with a dull, heavy sound, its surface still shifting uncontrollably. Up close, it was worse. Its structure didn't make sense. Panels overlapped in impossible ways. Depth and shape seemed to change depending on the angle you looked from. Mara forced herself closer. "Can we use it?" one of the others asked. Elias was already kneeling beside it, eyes wide. "I don't know," he said. "But we're about to find out." The drone reacted. Not with force. With correction. Its surface began to stabilize, the erratic motion slowing as it adapted to whatever had disrupted it. Learning. Fixing. Recovering. Back. Mara snapped. Too late. A pulse of energy burst outward. Not explosive, not destructive, but precise. The group was thrown back, not injured but disoriented. When Mara pushed herself up, the drone was already rising. Stabilized. Silent again. Watching. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the drone turned. And left. It didn't attack. It didn't retaliate. It simply left. Silence settled over the group. Heavy. Confused. Mara stared after it, her mind racing. "That wasn't a failure," she said slowly. Elias shook his head. "No." He looked at her, something uneasy in his expression. "That was feedback." Mara felt a chill run through her. Because she understood. They hadn't just attacked the system. They had interacted with it, affected it, forced it to respond. And somewhere, beyond the green sky, something had noticed. That night, as they hid in the shadows of a fractured ridge, Mara couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of a new, dangerous thought forming in her mind. What if they weren't just surviving anymore? They were starting to matter? The signal came 3 cycles after the drone incident. Not from the sky. From below. Mara almost missed it. They had taken shelter inside a narrow canyon. Walls too steep for drones to scan easily, ground too unstable for most of the larger creatures. It wasn't safe, but it was safer. Elias was the one who noticed. "Wait," he said suddenly, crouching low. Mara froze mid-step. "What?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pressed his hand against the canyon wall, eyes narrowing. "Do you feel that?" She frowned, then placed her palm against the surface. At first, nothing. Then something. A faint vibration. Not random. Rhythmic. "Movement," one of the others whispered. Elias shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Pattern." They followed it. Deeper into the canyon, where the light from the twin suns barely reached. The air grew colder, thinner. The strange ground beneath their feet became more rigid, less organic, more structured. Artificial. Mara's pulse quickened. "Stay close," she murmured. The entrance was almost invisible. A narrow fracture in the canyon wall, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. No markings. No indication it led anywhere. Except the vibration was stronger there. Clear. Calling. Inside, the world changed. The walls were smooth. Too smooth. Not carved by erosion or time, but shaped, deliberately. The material was unfamiliar, dark but faintly reflective, absorbing light in a way that made depth hard to judge. "Alien?" someone asked quietly. Elias ran his fingers along the surface. "No," he said. Mara glanced at him. "You sure?" He hesitated. "I'm sure it's not like anything we've seen out there." They moved carefully, deeper into the structure. The passage sloped downward, spiraling gently. The vibration grew stronger, resolving into something more distinct. The pulse. Like a heartbeat. Then they saw it. The chamber opened suddenly, wide and circular, the ceiling arching high above them. Faint light pulsed along the walls in slow, steady waves, illuminating the space just enough to reveal what lay within. Mara stopped. Her breath caught. Because the structure wasn't empty. It was human. Not modern. Not intact. But unmistakably human. Fragments of equipment lay scattered across the chamber, corroded, broken, but familiar in design. Metal frameworks. Paneling. Even what looked like old storage containers, their surfaces worn by time. Impossible, one of the soldiers whispered. Mara stepped forward slowly, her eyes scanning everything. This place, it's been here a long time. Elias moved past her, drawn toward the center of the chamber. That's not the impossible part, he said. At the center stood a column. Cylindrical. Covered in markings. Mara approached cautiously. And felt her stomach drop. They weren't alien symbols. Not entirely. Some were distorted, altered, but others were recognizable. Fragments of languages. English, Arabic, Mandarin, and others older still, Latin, Sanskrit, scripts she couldn't immediately identify but felt eerily familiar. People were here before us, Mara said quietly. Elias nodded, his expression pale. Not just people, he said. Civilizations. He began tracing the markings, his fingers moving carefully as he tried to piece them together. It's not a single message, he muttered. It's layered. Different groups, different times. Can you read it? Marist. Some of it. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the faint pulse of the chamber. Then Elias stepped back. I think I understand enough. Mara crossed her arms. Tell me. He looked at her. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid. They were taken, he said. Like us. Mara didn't react immediately. She didn't need to. She already knew. Different worlds, Elias continued. Different species. Brought here. Tested. Studied. He gestured around the chamber. This place, it's a record. Or what's left of one. Tested how? Someone asked. Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed to a section of the column, one where the markings were more intact. Mara stepped closer. And read. The translation wasn't perfect. But it didn't need to be. Survival is not the objective. Mara's chest tightened. Adaptation is. Silence fell over the chamber. Heavy. Absolute. They're not trying to kill us, one of the civilians said, voice trembling. Mara shook her head slowly. No, she said. They're trying to change us. Elias nodded. The drones. The creatures. The environment. It's all pressure. He looked back at the column. Every group that came before us, they were forced to evolve. To become something else. And if they didn't? The soldier asked. Elias didn't need to answer. The ruins already had. Mara turned away from the column, her mind racing. Why? She asked. What's the point of any of this? For a moment, no one spoke. Then Elias said quietly, what if this isn't about conquest? Mara looked at him. What if they're not invaders? He continued. What if they're collectors? The word hung in the air. Wrong. But fitting. They don't want Earth, Elias said. If they did, they would have taken it intact. Not emptied it. Then what do they want? Mara demanded. Elias met her gaze. He said. The realization hit harder than any creature, any storm, any loss. Not our planet. Not our resources. Not our technology. Refined. Reshaped. Tested until only the most adaptable remained. Mara clenched her fists. We're not experiments, she said sharply. Elias didn't argue. But he didn't agree either. The chamber pulsed again. Stronger this time. The light along the walls brightening, shifting. Something had changed. Mara felt it instantly, that same sensation she'd felt when the drones first appeared. That feeling of being watched. They know we're here, she said. Above them, faintly at first, then louder. A sound. Not from within the structure. From outside. Mara turned toward the entrance. Her instinct screamed. "Move," she said. "Now." They didn't question it. They ran. As they reached the narrow passage, the ground trembled, not violently, but with controlled force. Deliberate. When they emerged back into the canyon, the sky had changed. The drones were there. Not one. Not a few. Hundreds. Hovering silently above the canyon, their scanning beams converging on a single point. On them. Mara's breath caught. "They've never done this before," one of the soldiers said. "No," Elias replied, staring upward. "They haven't." The beams intensified, crossing, overlapping, forming a lattice of light that locked the canyon in place. Not attacking. Containing. Mara stepped forward slowly, her eyes fixed on the sky. Her mind racing. They had found something. Learned something. And now, they had the aliens' full attention. For the first time since arriving on this world, humanity wasn't just being observed. They were being acknowledged. They didn't run. Not this time. The canyon glowed under the lattice of light, beams crossing overhead like a cage made of stars. The drones hovered in perfect formation, silent and unmoving, their attention locked onto the small group of humans below. I felt it, the pressure. Not physical. Intentional. Focused. "They're waiting," Elias said quietly. "Waiting for what?" one of the others whispered. Mara didn't answer. Because she already knew. For us. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time since arriving on this world, there were no creatures attacking, no unpredictable patterns, no chaos. Only stillness. Deliberate. Controlled. "They've changed the rules," Mara said. Elias nodded slightly. "Or we did." That was the moment it became clear. Everything up until now, the drones, the creatures, the environment, it had all been indirect. Pressure without confrontation. Observation without interference. But this? This was different. This was a response. Mara stepped forward. "Wait," one of the soldiers started. She raised a hand, stopping him. "If this is a test," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her, "then hiding isn't the answer anymore." She moved out from the shadow of the canyon wall. Into the open. The beams shifted instantly, tracking her. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might give her away, but she forced herself to keep walking, slow, deliberate, controlled. Not prey. Not anymore. Behind her, Elias cursed under his breath. "She's right," he said a moment later. "If we keep reacting, we stay part of the system." "And if we don't?" someone asked. Elias hesitated. "Then we change it." Mara stopped at the center of the canyon. Every drone was focused on her now. Hundreds of them. Watching. "Is this what you want?" she said, her voice echoing faintly against the stone. No response. She clenched her fists. "You took us from our world. You put us here. You hunt us, test us, watch us." Her voice rose, anger breaking through. "But you don't understand us." The beams intensified. Not threatening. Listening. Mara took a breath. Then she did something none of them had done before. She dropped her weapon. It hit the ground with a dull sound. The drones reacted, not aggressively, but with a subtle shift, their formation tightening. "We adapt," she said, louder now. "That's what you want, right?" Her gaze swept across the sky. "Then watch this." Behind her, Elias moved. Quickly. "Now," he whispered. The others sprang into action. The plan had formed in minutes. Reckless. Desperate. Human. Using fragments of scavenged drone material and the unstable device Elias had modified before, they had built something new. Not a weapon. A signal. Elias activated it. For a split second, nothing happened. The air changed. A pulse erupted outward, not visible, not audible in the normal sense, but felt. A deep, resonant distortion that rippled through the canyon and into the sky above. The drones reacted instantly. Not attacking. Not retreating. Reconfiguring. Their formation broke. Shifted. Collapsed inward. "What did you do?" one of the soldiers shouted. Elias didn't answer. He was staring at the device, his expression somewhere between awe and fear. "They're responding," he said. The sky darkened. Not gradually. All at once. The green faded, replaced by something deeper, heavier. The swirling patterns above seemed to pull inward, converging toward a single point directly overhead. The twin suns dimmed. Not eclipsed. Suppressed. And then, it arrived. Not a drone. Not a creature. Something else. It didn't descend. It unfolded. Space itself seemed to bend, opening like a fracture in reality. From within it emerged a structure so vast, so incomprehensible, that Mara's mind struggled to process its shape. It wasn't solid. It wasn't fluid. It was both, and neither. The air vibrated with its presence. Not sound. Not exactly. More like meaning pressing against her thoughts. Everyone fell silent. Not by choice. Because something deeper than fear had taken hold. Mara stared up at it, her breath shallow. "This is it," she whispered. Elias stepped beside her. "This is them." The drones repositioned, forming a perfect circle around the canyon. Not as a barrier. As an audience. The massive structure above shifted. Focused. On Mara. Her mind flooded with something, images, concepts, fragments of understanding that weren't hers. Not language. Not words. But she understood anyway. "You resist." Mara staggered slightly, gripping her head. You adapt." The pressure increased. Not painful. Overwhelming. Mara forced herself to stand straight. To look up. "We survive," she said. The pause. Insufficient. The word hit harder than anything else. Mara's jaw tightened. "No," she said. Elias glanced at her, startled. "Mara." She stepped forward. "You're wrong." The air seemed to still. Even the structure above paused. "We don't just survive," she said, her voice steady now. "We change. We learn. We fight." She gestured to the group behind her. To each other. Another pause. Longer this time. The presence shifted. "Demonstrate." Mara smiled faintly. Not with humor. With defiance. She looked at Elias. He nodded. "Again," she said. He activated the signal. This time, it didn't just pulse. It spread. The distortion rippled outward, interacting with the drones, the environment, even the air itself. The lattice of light shattered, beams breaking apart into chaotic fragments. The drones reacted, not with control, but with instability. For the first time, the system broke. The structure above surged. Not in anger. In interest. The pressure in Mara's mind shifted again. Unexpected. She took a step forward. "That's what we are," she said. Silence. The green sky cracked. Not metaphorically. Literally. Fractures of light spread across it, thin at first, then widening, revealing something beyond. Not space. Not emptiness. Something else. Something vast. The test was over. Or perhaps, it had just begun. Mara stood beneath the breaking sky, her heart steady for the first time since Earth fell. They weren't prey. They weren't subjects. They were something new. And whatever came next, humanity would meet it head-on.